everybody, my name is Miss Higby and welcome to today's video of me reading The Royal Rabbits of London, The Hunt for the Golden Carrot. Thank you so much for coming back to listen to the next story of this chapter of this story. I really hope you're enjoying it just as much as I am. So, where we left off, the Royal Rabbits have arrived. The plan is in action. Zeno and Clooney were just looking in Farmer Ploughman's shed to look for some golden paint when they came across a cat. Let's start. Chapter 15. All the while, Beelzebub gnawed at the wire. Shiloh stared at the dog. Its belly went gently up and down as it breathed, and occasionally it paddled its feet in a dream, but it didn't wake up. It had no reason to. All was quiet. The sun was shining and the dog slumbered contentedly in the warmth of the early autumn rays. At last the hole was big enough for Shiloh to squeeze through, belly to the ground and making sure he was hidden behind a row of orange pumpkins. He made his way to the line of carrots. He was just about to dig up the first one when he sensed movement behind him. The fur on his neck bristled. His heart stopped. But when nothing bad happened, he slowly turned round. There, to his surprise, was a mole. Shiloh breathed out with relief. I think I must have made a wrong turning, said the mole, peering at Shiloh through her thick spectacles. Moles, as I'm sure you know, are nearly blind, but those lucky enough to have glasses can see a little. Where were you hoping to be? Shiloh asked. Just because he was in a great hurry didn't mean he should forget his manners. Well, I was aiming for the compost heap at the other end of the garden, said the mole, licking her lips with a pointy pink tongue. There are lots of worms and woodlice there. And there's Shiloh, talking to the mole. Just popped up from the ground. This is the vegetable patch, Shiloh informed her politely. Ah, then I have taken a wrong turning. Thanks for your help. And with that, the mole disappeared down her hole, leaving Shiloh alone once more to get on with his task. He dug rapidly and energetically. When he had pulled up the first carrot, he hurried back to the hole in the wire netting and handed it to Beelzebub. Magnifique, Beelzebub exclaimed, beaming. But we need huge ones, the biggest you can find. Encouraged by her praise, Shiloh went to dig up more. He figured he needed 4 or 5, just in case they made mistakes. In order for the carrot to be passed off as the real golden carrot, it had to be perfect and very large. A moment later, Shiloh passed the second carrot to Beelzebub, then the third, then the fourth. Really, this was much easier than he'd anticipated. He was in the middle of digging up the fifth when he heard a high-pitched squeal erupt from the lawn. He stood on his hind legs to see what was going on. The ploughman's youngest daughter was standing on the grass, pointing at a mound of earth. The mole, who had only a moment ago been in the vegetable garden, now poked out her head and looked around hopefully. Oh no, she groaned in disappointment. Wrong again. And then she proceeded to disappear back into the mound of earth and head for the other end of the garden before the girl had time to grab her. To Shiloh's dismay, the commotion had awoken the dog. It trotted to the mound of earth and sniffed it excitedly, wagging its tail. The girl patted it. If you hadn't been asleep, you might have caught the mole, she said. Useless dog. Then she turned to her mother, who was now on her feet. We need to set a mole trap, Mum. With the mole now vanished into the ground, the dog grew bored of the mound of earth and looked around to see what else might be on offer in the garden. Instantly, it spotted Beelzebub by the fence. It pricked its ears, narrowed its eyes, and immediately gave chase. Beelzebub scampered as quickly as she could towards the hedge, desperately trying not to drop the carrots Shiloh had collected. But the dog was fast, and Belle de Paul was slowed down by her load. She could almost smell its breath. Dog food, yuck, as it was now only a whisker away. Then something extraordinary happened. Rabbits appeared everywhere, swarming in great numbers into Mr. and Mrs. Plowman's garden. As Belle de Paul dived into the hedge, the dog, distracted by the sight of so many paws and so many white fluffy tails and so many pairs of ears, skidded to a stop on the grass, allowing the hopster time to make her escape without dropping a single carrot. The rabbits in the garden began frantically digging. The dog blinked. Was this a dream? If it was quite possibly the most delightful dream ever. It jumped up and down with excitement. Bang! The farmer's wife fired her gun in an attempt to deter the digging bunnies. And Shiloh, still in the middle of the vegetable garden, could only watch in horror as Mrs. Plowman fired her gunshot randomly at the magic-crazed rabbits. He grabbed the final carrot and, deciding not to risk running across the lawn, he dived into the hole the mole had made and scampered through the darkness, hoping that the mole had burrowed successfully to the compost heap after all. He hadn't seen Belle de Paul to make it to safety of the hedge, and as he scrabbled through the dark, he prayed that she was okay. It sickened him to think of her in the middle of all that pandemonium, with Mrs. Plowman's bullet whizzing through the air and the dog in determined pursuit. But he had to trust that Belle would know what to do. She was, after all, a royal rabbit. At last, when he came out into the light, he saw, to his relief, the compost heap, and the mole dining happily on juicy worms and crispy woodlice. Shiloh hurried away from the garden and towards the field, carrying his carrot and trying not to listen to the sound of Mrs. Plowman's shotgun ringing through the air. Zeno wrestled with the cat. This might sound odd to a reader unfamiliar with these extra-large, super-intelligent, highly trained hopster rabbits, but to those of you in the know, you will appreciate that for Zeno, a cat was not the most fearsome opponent. Ratsies, being giant super rats, were worse, far worse. Minks were pretty dreadful, but cats, vicious and cunning as they were, did not necessarily mean curtains for a royal rabbit hopster. As Zeno and the cat tumbled and rolled, dived and ducked on the floor, Clooney swiftly read the labels on all the pots of paint lined up in a row on the wall at the back of the workshop. At last, he found the word gold written in large black letters on a big white label. He didn't know that not so very long ago, Farmer Plowman's son had gone to school in fancy dress, as a goldfish. Clooney grabbed the pot and jumped to the ground, now to put an end to the fight so that he and Zeno could escape. Sweeping his gaze round the workshop, Clooney spotted a large basket in the shape of a dome lying in the corner beneath a blanket of dust. He placed the paint pot on the floor and hurried over to get it. Then he saw an opportune moment. He placed the basket over the cat, capturing it inside like a spider in a cup. Zeno was very surprised to see that the cat had been trapped, and a little disappointed, for he felt he had very much had the situation under control. But, without waiting for an explanation, or indeed any sort of conversation, he retrieved the brushes, and together the two royal rabbits scampered out of the workshop, before the cat had worked out how to free herself, which she did pretty swiftly, for cats are almost as clever as hopster rabbits. By early afternoon, all of the hopster rabbits had gathered once more at Horatio's burrow. Shiloh was the first to arrive, and was relieved to see Belle de Paul a few moments later. When Zeno and Clooney appeared with the paint and the brushes, the rabbits didn't congratulate each other or celebrate their triumphs, for this was only the beginning of the plan, and there was a long way to go before they could revel in their success. The group of four simply nodded in the way royal rabbits do when part of a plan has been completed, and set off for the gamekeeper's shed in search of Horatio and Laser. That brings us to the end of chapter 15. So, they've got the paint, they've got the brushes, they've got the carrots. So now it's time for phase 2 of the plan. So, come back tomorrow ready for chapter 16, and I look forward to seeing you all then. Okay, take care. Bye.